Welcome to Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hi, everyone. This is Gary Wilson, and welcome to this week's podcast in Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. So this is the podcast for you if you're an accountant, you're a pilot, a dentist, a chiropractor, even teachers, usually professionals who want to or do invest and often own their own business. So if your chances are you're an orthodontist and may own your own orthodontic practice. The basic theme is that we really do invest correctly. We invest honorably and ethically in the areas that we do invest in. So it's win-win for the community, win-win for the tenants in case of rentals, and win-win for us, of course, the investor. So what this is not is it's not like the no money down stuff. No smoke and mirrors here. It's just good old fashioned blocking and tackling. And quite frankly, everybody I've ever met, guys, it's achieved great levels of success in investing. That's how they're doing it. Just basically building a solid foundation. So in any case, if you'd like to be part of the community, obviously you can subscribe to the podcast. It's on any number of 75 different channels. I mean, iHeart Music, iTunes, Stitcher, they're all out there. And also online on myinvestmentservices.com, you can click on members area and check out the members area. There's basically like a getting started kind of thing, very affordable, and also the more advanced version, which is you're really in the game and you want to network and communicate. And we're several thousand strong now, so we'd be glad to have you on board. For today's subject, slightly different because it's something I haven't done myself personally. So a friend of mine named Aaron, we're in the same GoBundance mastermind group called GoBundance, Healthy, Wealthy, Generous Men who seek to lead epic lives. We do have a women's group too, by the way. So just for you, there's two groups, men group and women's group. And Aaron has done a good business work with auctions at the courthouses. So I thought it'd be a great idea to have you listen to this and get some examples and maybe some real life stories and maybe a little bit of how to. So Aaron, hey, welcome aboard, brother. I appreciate you taking your precious time to help out the group here. So thank you very much for joining us,
Glad to be here. Excited to come on and get to talk to you about all sorts of stuff.
Excellent. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, some folks maybe in your area that are listening probably or may know you, or for those who don't, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of start off a little bit of like, who you are and, where you came from, and that'll give us some context, and then we can go into the some details after that. How about that?
Awesome. Well, very good. So my name's Aaron Amuchastegui. I live in Northern California and Texas. So we live in California half the time and Texas half the time. I've got a wife and I have 4 kids, and right now we spend a lot of our life kind of traveling around the world, around the country, kind of homeschooling our kids and like learning on the road. And it's been a really fun spot to get here. And then we also have our investment businesses that take up a few days a month of our efforts, so that way we can live this other life. And kind of all this started. So I grew up in Southern Oregon, and my dad was a home builder, and so I grew up around real estate investing and construction, and I really loved that industry. And went to school at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo down in Southern California. I went to school to study construction management. At the time, I was planning to go to school for a couple of years and come back and help run my dad's business. And I was not planning on staying in California. But what I didn't know was I was a kid from small town Southern Oregon, and I'd never really seen the world yet. So as soon as I got down to San Luis Obispo and Pismo Beach and saw the California weather, there wasn't much of a chance that I was going to be going back to Oregon anytime soon. And so where I thought it was going to be temporary, it became permanent. I graduated from construction management in 2005, I think it was. And that was the height of the housing boom, especially the height of the housing boom in California. And so it gave me this kind of unrealistic expectation of what life was going to be like. I had interned a couple years for this home builder. So by the time I graduated, I had won a couple like national championships, and so I was heavily recruited. I had all these companies offering me jobs and trying to get me to go to work for them. And I chose a privately owned home builder that was run out of Sacramento and Santa Barbara, and I got to kind of run those Southern California operations for that home builder. But again, it was this unrealistic thing because we were golfing like 2 or 3 days a week, and as soon as we would build the house, they would sell, and we had this fine-tuned machine. Like we were building houses in like 50 work days. And so next month we'd say, oh, I wonder if we could do it in 48 this time. So it was everything was going really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then the market started to crash. And in 07, it started to slow down. And in 08, it really started to slow down. And that's when we started to see crashes and foreclosures everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to lay off our whole company. We had to move up to Sacramento. And so instead of like 70 employees, there was like 7 of us left and up in Northern California. And we were trying to figure out what was next as we were kind of doing these workouts with the banks to finish building out these new home projects. And we kept trying different businesses. We tried to create these data businesses. We tried to consult on when IndyMac was taken over by the Fed, we tried to consult on a bunch of development deals.
Mm-hmm.
We tried to buy REOs online so we could flip them because we knew we had those skills, and we'd say, hey, this one's worth 150 and we could fix it and flip it for 200. But it didn't matter how many offers we would write. Our offer never got accepted. We didn't know the guy who knew the guy. They knew exactly who they were going to sell to every time. It didn't matter if we wrote an offer 10 seconds after it came on the market. We never got a single one that way. We would get so close, and then we would lose out on all of them. Along the way, we were trying a whole bunch of different businesses, and we started to look into the auction process. And the auction process is what happens before it becomes an REO. It kind of becomes a foreclosure. And at that time, there wasn't anything online about it. There wasn't a way to get there. Nobody was really doing it, and so we had to teach ourselves. And so that was the moment that we found this new business. And and I'll stop there to see if you have any questions yet. But I can go on to how that became what it became.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that introduction. It gives us a great background. And by the way, I just last month was down at the San Luis Obispo in Morro Bay, and also taught at Pismo Beach, by the way.
Yeah.
And, great. I love that part of California, man. And so I was out there. Actually, I was in California literally from January 4th all the way through June 4th. So literally 5 months. But yeah, great place. An interesting story because you start off like a lot of people in the boom time. Everything was great. And then, boy, this recession, that last recession, really kind of unique because it was real estate driven, which is not typical. Most recessions are driven by other factors, so this was pretty unique. But what's interesting is you didn't give up. I mean, successful people it's a matter of persistence and consistency. And, you just always have to be mindful of looking for the opportunities. Wherever there's adversity, there's opportunity. And you did discover it. You just had to discover what was your particular strategy to tap into that market. So let's talk about that a little bit. So let's talk about what it is you're doing now. Because I know you've had success with auctions, and I'm guessing that came out of that whole learning experience back, now 10, 12 years ago. So if you mind, share a little bit about that, because I think people are going to really start paying attention here and probably taking some notes. This is good stuff,
Yeah, it was a really unique time, and yes, we didn't give up, but man, it wasn't a fun time, going from and it wasn't a fun time for just about anybody, right? Everybody went from high-paying jobs to barely making it and having to retrain your spending habits to live within your means, try to rechange what's there, and then also not quite knowing what jobs were out there.
Mm-hmm.
When we first got into this, there was a whole bunch of building trades that didn't have jobs anymore. Painting companies and general contractors and all these people that were eager for work. Getting into our first auction. So I'll talk about our first auction, how it got there, and then what it's become now. But to find the business, again, nobody was doing it at the time. So there were a couple websites out there that would post like, hey, this is scheduled for foreclosure, but there was no lessons. And we saw one that was coming up for sale through there. And one of the guys that we were working with, he owned another property in that neighborhood and said, oh, if you could actually get this for about $120,000, that'd be a great deal. And so we went down to auction and we started, looking at kind of that paperwork, but we didn't really know how it was going to work. So I went down to the courthouse. I started reading all the loan documents and figuring out like what that process was for what foreclosure was. And it would say, on this day, we're going to hold this auction and the opening bid is going to be this, and this is how it's going to work. And so and it was really interesting because that's how that was my moment where I finally discovered what caused a lot of the housing crash, because a lot of those documents I was reading would say, okay, your monthly payment is going to be $2,200 a month. But on this day, 9 years from now, it's going to change from $2,200 a month to like $8,500 a month. Like it wasn't like small jumps. It was these crazy jumps. And so then it finally made sense to me, like, oh, that's what happened. We go to the auction. There's only 3 people at the auction. There's a guy with a laptop on a trash can, and he's calling out the bids to go to sale. And he gets to that one and he says the address, 120,000, and none of the other guys bid on it. And the guy that one of the guys I was working for at the time, he says, "Oh, I want to bid on that." And then the auctioneer looked at us and said, "So penny over?" And we go, "Yeah." And so we say 126,000, and he goes, "Going once, going twice, sold." And the other three people that were there that had been doing auctions, they kind of gasped. They were like, so we're like, "Oh my God, what did we do? What did we do wrong? Like, did we not buy the right house? Was there a problem? Should we have not, done that?" And so we told the guy, and he starts filling out the receipt. And again, we hand him our cashier's checks. He's filling out this piece of paper, and it doesn't have an address on it anywhere. And I said, "Well, why aren't you putting the address on there?" He goes, "Well, no, there's no address. You're buying a loan, and a legal description like you don't know yet what you got." And we were like, "Oh my goodness." The long story short was we had a terrified 2 weeks wondering if we had just lost our life savings. The 2 weeks later, the deed showed up in the mail. We recorded it. We got a title report done. And we actually owned the property free and clear. We listed it for sale. We sold it, and we were off to the races. Wow. And it was we got super lucky, right? The very first one we went to, we bought. The next 3 weeks after that, we'd go to auction every day and drive houses every day, and we never even got to bid on any. So it took us a little while to figure out what that system was, to figure out how we were going to do it later. But that was, if we hadn't bought that first one, I would have been in a totally different industry. But we got that one. It helped us know that it could work, and it was worth figuring it out. So auctions in different states are in California, they happen every single day. So every single day there's foreclosures auction on the courthouse steps, and there's one in each county. In Oregon, they happen every day. In places like Colorado, I think they happen once a week. Right now, we're doing most of our investing is in Texas, and in Texas they're once a month. And there's a lot of fun reasons for that. I really loved investing in California when we did it. After I did our first couple, I was able to start my own business, to find some investors, and we had flipped over 1,000 houses in Northern California. And then we had big teams, and we were showing up every day and doing that. But it was a full-time job, a full gig. And in 2013, 2014, when a lot of people started doing the business, we got put out of business because we had a lot of overhead. And now that it was easy, a lot of people could come in and put us out. So out in Texas, that's where we do it now. And one of the unique things about Texas is, for like your audience, where they have full-time jobs, there's a lot of people that reach out to me and they say, "Hey, I do this, but in my state, auctions are once a month. In Georgia, they're once a month. In Texas, they're once a month. They're once a week." And so those are set up in a way where someone could have a full-time job doing something else and prepare for the local auction, buy a house, and then go back to their day job the rest of the month. So there's kind of this like maybe 4 or 5 step plan in order to go to auctions, what you should look for before you buy the property, and how you should determine what your bid is and what that process will look like. And so the first is if you're looking at doing it in your state, you want to figure out where to get the list, right? So where can you get the list of foreclosures? There's a few websites that are nationwide. West Coast, it's Foreclosure Radar and Property Radar. In Texas, it's FLS Online. There's some states where it's Realty Track. So I would just search like foreclosure auction in your county and foreclosure auction in your state, and you'll figure out where to get that list. So first, you get your list. Okay. And then you try to narrow it down to what your mindset is. You say, okay, so there's 40 houses going to sale at the end of the month, but I only want the ones that were built in the last 10 years. So now that's going to knock it down to my 15. So first you filter it based on, I would like to buy this house for a rental or for a flip. Then you go drive by them all. And ideally you drive by them all kind of close to auction. I've seen them burn down the day before auction. I've seen houses that weren't there, that it said on paper there was a house, but it was completely gone because it had been demoed. And we've also had houses that were absolutely perfect. We've had houses that we buy at auction and we change the locks and we walk in and I put a for sale sign in the front yard that day. So we've had all sorts of different versions so you drive by every house. And so you've got your list now of like 10 or 15 houses. You drive by all of them. After that, you say, all right, I like these ones or I don't like these ones. If people are just getting started, I would say only buy the vacant ones. Don't deal with occupied houses because there's a whole lot of extra things that go with that. There's moral dilemmas that happen there. There's having to negotiate move outs. It's a much sadder thing. And one of the differences though is if it's a rental. So sometimes you can look at tax records and see the property tax bill is getting sent somewhere else. Hey, it's occupied, but it's probably a renter. I could buy it and just keep renting the house to them. So if you're looking at that, so those are some of the things now. So now you have your list of 15 down to 10.
Okay.
Now you want to do like a CMA. So just like anywhere you're going to invest, right? So I don't know if your listeners, they look at pricing themselves or if they hire agents, but then the next step is to say, what would this house be worth?
Right.
In its prime, so it would be worth 100,000 or it'd be worth 200,000. What would it rent for? This is where we kind of build our pro forma. And then when it comes to how much it's going to cost to fix up, a nice thing about buying on the MLS is you can get it in escrow. You can go inside with your contractor and come up with a quote that's $12,480, right? Mm-hmm. Auctions are a little different. You're going to have to come up with a guess based on what you saw from the street. You figure out what you can see when you look in the windows, and so you're going to look at it and go, all right, I think it's going to be somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000. Mm-hmm. Next, you have to figure out what your profit margin should be. Like, so if I'm going to invest $100,000, I want to make $10,000 on it, or I want to make $20,000 on it, or I want to rent it for at least $1,200. Mm-hmm. And you take all those factors and you back in. So now you've got your list of 10 houses, and you say the most I'm going to pay for this one is 100. The most I'm going to pay for this one is 90. The most I'm going to pay for this one is 110. And you show up to auction. Now that list of 40 houses that started at auction, only 10 of them will actually go to sale. And so of the 10 that you prepped, hopefully 1 or 2 does go to auction. And that's why we prep for a lot of them. And then that can be the one that you buy.
Okay.
Very seldom will someone have the luck that I had on my first one where we picked an address. We only drove by that one and we bought that one.
Yeah.
It's a big numbers game where it's like fishing. You're just fishing all day long. And then you don't never know which house is going to come up for auction. Then it comes up and you buy it. So we have teams that do that. So when we go to auction every month, we'll drive by like 300 or 400 houses. We'll do title research on them to try to make sure that they're first. There are risks at buying houses at our auction. They could have different liens on them and things like that. Then we come up with what we think each of them is worth, and we come with a really big list of what we think it's going to be. And the bigger your list, the better chance you have of buying a house.
Okay. Now, interesting, you mentioned liens. So is there another step? So you've gone through the steps. First, you figure out what is out there, what the possibilities are. Then you narrow it down by certain criteria like age of the properties, things like that. And then what your goals are. Then you go drive by and narrow it down further. But before you go to the actual auction, you got your final list of, say, 10 properties. Do you do like preliminary title searches just to see what are all the liens and things like that? Or is there like interim step there to help you know exactly like what you're inheriting when you do buy a property at auction,
Yeah. We used to have to go to the courthouse or the recorder's office to get that info. Okay. Now there's a lot of info you can get online from your house. And I would search, my Sacramento County recorder office or whichever county you're looking at, search the recorder office and see if they do have anything online. If they don't, you can go into the recorder's office. But if they have it online, you can do it that way. The first thing you do is you search the person's name. Mm-hmm. So you search the person's name, and if it's a really common name, you might see hundreds of houses that they've bought. And if it's not a very common name and they've only bought one house, hopefully you see one. Mm-hmm. You search the name and you see what's recorded on there. And even if you've never done it before, they have these summaries that you can kind of see, is this something to worry about or not? There's state tax lien. There's federal tax lien. There's lis pendens, which means lawsuit. So there's some big things that show up on there that then you can click on them, you can read them, you can look at it, and it could say state tax lien, $2,500. All right, that's fine. You're just going to lower your bid by $2,500.
Okay.
It might say federal tax lien, $50,000. And in that case, you go, hey, I'm not going to buy this because there's no way we can get it. The federal tax liens most of the time will go away, but they take 4 months to do it. So after 4 months, they'll kind of get extinguished. But the first way to kind of educating yourself is you do a name search. You start to look at all the different documents that are recorded. Mm-hmm. And the way that priority works is in order. So if they bought it on this day and they recorded a loan that day, that loan is in first position. If they get another loan 6 months later, that loan's in second position. If they paid off the first one, there will be a document that says. So you kind of just look at their name and start looking at, okay, they got a loan, they paid off this loan. Okay, they only have one loan on it. That's the one in the notice of default. It's going to be okay. And as difficult as that is to explain like over a podcast, it's once someone actually goes and looks at it, it's not that difficult. And so starting with a name search, reading all the documents that are there. A lot of it's really boring reading, but man, I learned so much when I was doing that when I first got started. The next thing you do is you search for property tax bills. Most of the time, that's readily available information that you could just search an address and property tax, and you can say, hey, they owe $5,000 on their taxes they haven't paid, things like that.
Okay, so typically the liens will be, I'm sure, taxes first, right? Because the government's always going to get paid first. and then probably mechanics liens, and then the loans would probably be the after that. But the bottom line is, if you bid $100,000, that's got to be enough to cover, like you said, the all the liens. Is there anything that gets expunged, like do the lenders, do the mortgages get wiped off? I mean, that's where I'm not real clear. Let's say you're bidding with one other person. You've got your number. You know you can't be more than 100. But let's say nobody else is bidding, just you. I mean, you probably wouldn't start off at 100. You'd probably start off whatever the auctioneer is going to say. Hey, here's our minimum or something like that. How does that whole thing start?
The reason auctions work so well isn't that you pay your max for most of them. It's that, out of the 10 houses that you buy, most of them will be really close to your max, but then 1 out of 10 will be much, much less because nobody bid on it, because nobody drove by that one, because nobody prepared. So the auctioneer will start an opening bid. The most they can open it up at is what the debt is. So but at any time they can actually decide right before opening. The bank can say, the person owes $100,000, but we want to get rid of this. We're going to open the bidding at $40,000.
Okay.
Sometimes the bank will bid against you. So they'll say the opening bid is 40,000 and you'll say 41. And then the trustee, the auctioneer will say, okay, now the bank bids 45. But the idea is, yes, you just bid small increments. You just keep bidding $1,000 or $100 more than the last one as you kind of make your way up to your max bid. The hope is that, yes, you get, even though you have your list of 10 houses and the most you're willing to pay, you're hoping to get one for a lot less. Another part that happens is you have to pay in all cash. So in California, in Oregon, in Texas, if you're going to bid $100,000, you need to bring $100,000 in cashier's checks. And part of what we do is we bring it like a wallet. Instead of bringing $100,000 cashier's checks, you bring a $50,000 cashier's check, a $20,000, a $15,000, a 10, and a 5. That way, if you actually do get the house for $75,000, you're not going to hand them a $100,000 check and wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks for the refund. You're going to try to get it as close to that as you can. But at that moment, you're going to sign it over. Now, some states you can wire the funds afterward. I think Hawaii, you can wire the funds afterward. Arizona, you can wire them the next day, or you have a day or two. I haven't done it in those areas, but most of the places we've done it in, it's all cash that first day. And so it's a very real thing. You bid, they take your checks. At that point, you're just waiting for your receipt.
Excellent. Okay, this is such a great subject. So then obviously you get the property. It might be a couple of weeks before you actually get the deed. Assuming it's vacant, you can go in and do any work that has to be done, put it back on the market, or in some cases rent it out. What I want to talk about now, if you don't mind, is you mentioned Oregon, California, Texas. And obviously every state, and even in Canada too, I live part-time up here in Canada. There's not as many foreclosures, not nearly as many, but every province could have its own little set of rules. And it sounds like it's the same thing in the States. But as far as the word goes, have you ever been tempted or researched other states? Georgia might be a good place, looks like, or Utah, or have you done any research to figure out what other good areas might be to be doing this in? Because it looks like we're really, the market's streaming along. A lot of real estate, a lot of areas around the U.S. at least are starting to kind of flatten out a little bit. In other words, the increase in values is sort of the slow down. So it's like the beginning of another shift. But
because they are all so different, I think people should try to start close to home to see what's out there, because as they do different investing, being able to they learn the most when they can see things and keep their eyes on it. All my first houses I did were nearby where I was. Now I can fly to Texas and go back and forth these other places because I know what I'm doing and I've done it a lot. But at the beginning, you should definitely try close to home. So and really just starts with Google, right? So it would be Googling trustee sale auctions, foreclosure auctions, courthouse step auctions with your county, with your name. There's a website, auction.com, is kind of a highly marketed website. And if you click on their live auctions, they have live auctions in almost every county, right? And so they aren't the only person there, but you could take one of them and it says, oh, there's an auction on Tuesday at 9, and just go to that auction. When you're there, you'll see auction.com, but you'll also see a bunch of other trustees selling houses too. And you can really start to, just by watching, that'll be your quickest way to understand what it's going to be like in your area. And if there's, and being able to ask the auctioneers, hey, how does this work? How do I give you the checks? Do I need to pay you in the full amount? When does the deed show up? There's It's just about trying to research, but the best way to get the research is go to that first auction, find out when they're held in your county, and just go watch them a couple times. And you'll learn a lot about the opportunity based on how many people are there bidding, the sort of houses they buy. You can also kind of back into the idea to see if there's a good opportunity. So first you'll go and you'll see 3 houses get bought. Write it down, write down the address, write down what they bought it for. And then after the auction, go drive by those houses and go, oh, wow, they got a deal on this. Or no, they didn't. Don't just like look at Zillow and try to see, hey, did they get a good deal? Because you don't know if the house was actually gone.
Right.
And so but yeah, the best way to start learning is Google, try to figure out when the auctions are and go watch some of them. And then you'll get to see, how the finances work there. If it's one of those states where, you can wire funds, things like that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. 2 examples that I've clients of mine. One of them, almost just like you, his very first property, he wanted to go buy his own home. He wouldn't want to go to auction because he was going to save a ton of money, and got a decent house for a really awesome price. And he found out later on he really got lucky because he didn't do any type of a title search, any kind of research on any liens. He just thought, okay, if it's $50,000, he just owns it free and clear. He didn't realize he could have all these other liens involved with it. And it turns out he didn't. He just got really, really lucky. Another situation was didn't turn out so good. This guy literally went to auction to buy a house, went by the next day with his contractor, and he's like, I don't understand it. This place was here a couple of months ago. The house had been burned and razed, and literally enough time had passed. They literally filled in with dirt and planted grass seed, and the neighbors were cutting the grass. So he's like, he was a proud owner of a vacant lot, But I don't want to scare people. Just believe, you mentioned earlier, you got to go drive by the property. And if you wouldn't mind, Aaron, talk a little bit about. I'm going to have you give 1 or 2 examples here in a minute. But I'm just sort of thinking, let's talk about time frames. So we just went through the time frame of early 2000s boom time into a major recession, and climbing out of that, and now we're at obviously what appears to be a peak of a market again. But how have you seen that? Has that affected the time frame affected your strategy, or what's the impact of where we are in the market on any particular strategy when you're looking to buy houses at auction?
Yeah, and before I answer that, I do think it's great to share the pros and the cons of the story. It is such a high risk, high reward business, and it can be a lot of fun. But doing the due diligence and we like to drive. I'd like to drive by the houses the day before auction because so much can happen. And I've had the same things happen with people. I've walk into houses that are perfect, or walk into houses where the house was demoed and cut down, and now it's just grass. It's been a really interesting. I started doing this in 2009. We had done it a couple times. I was still working for that other company. My second daughter was born 6 weeks early, and at that time we were just really, really struggling. My wife was a waitress working nights, and I remember looking at my daughter in the incubator going, I need to try something new. I need to go after this. And that was how we bought that first house, right? That was when I finally gave my notice to quit my job my dad was my first investor. At that time too, nobody was in the business. And so one of the impacts that had was investors were out there trying to find ways to invest money because the world had just fallen apart. So after I'd done a couple, I got a call from a guy in Tahoe that's one of my business partners now. And he said, hey, I heard about what you've been doing. I manage people's stock funds up in Tahoe. I'd love to meet with you and talk to you about how this will work. And so I went and met with them for a couple hours, and they kept drilling me with questions. Well, how does this work? How does this work? How do we do this? How do we do this? And at the end of it, they kind of looked at each other, and one of them said, well, I'm in for $1 million, and I'm in for $1 million. And all of a sudden I had this big, investment equity fund to go try to get after this. So one of the unique things at the beginning was there was a lot of foreclosures. There wasn't very much opportunity. So that helped me 2 ways. There were people that wanted to invest and didn't know how to invest in anything right now because they couldn't figure out where the opportunities were. And there was also good properties that could be bought. And so from 2009 to 2012, that first auction, there was 3 people at auction. And then, people start to tell their friends. And then, over the next 6 months, then there's 5 people at auction, then 10 people at auction, then 20 people at auction. From 2009 to 2012, there were tons of houses going to sale. We could buy several every day. Like I said, we bought over 1,000 across 7 or 9 counties. Around 2013, a lot of the big hedge funds started getting into the business. So they saw that there were still lots of foreclosures at the time. Prices were still low. And these big hedge funds that wanted to now get into the rental home market, we had kind of proved out the model. A bunch of small guys like us had proved out the model that, hey, this is okay now. Hey, it's a safe business investment. So they went and hired a bunch of guys like us and started buying at auction. Well, in 2013, that put me out of business because they came and they bought every house. It was I had a heavy overhead business. I had a lot of company cars. I had company health plans. People were driving houses. People were bidding on houses every day. And so over that year, we lost like $1 million, my wife and I. And by the end of the year, I had to lay everybody off. And it wasn't that we bought bad houses; it was that we weren't properly managing our stuff. The other thing that happened at that point then is because those hedge funds bought everything, the housing prices in California, Northern California, shot way up. They went up 40 or 50%. So at first when they were buying, we thought they were crazy. Like, hey, they're almost paying retail for this. But they had created this new market.
Yep.
So now in Northern California, there's very few foreclosures that actually make sense. Some of them happen, and then the ones that do, there's still a lot of people bidding on them. So the opportunity in California is very difficult to get into unless you're in one of those small towns or small counties where not very many people go to auction.
Right.
So there still is a couple, each county still has some auctions going, but we used to have hundreds of houses sell in a day. And now on like the busiest day in Sacramento, maybe you're going to see 2 or 3. And so that's how it still is in California right now. There isn't a ton of them that are happening. And a lot of the places where they're every day, like Arizona, like Oregon, it's a similar story. Auctions happening, but in order to actually get a deal, you have to find a secret or you have to find one of those counties that not a lot of people are going to.
Yeah.
One of the advantages about states that do it once a week or once a month is you can still have a bunch of houses sell on the same day.
Yeah.
So in Texas, you could go to a county where 30 houses are going to sell that day. Now, back in 2010 and 2011, when the crash was still happening, you might have had 500 houses sell that day. So there's still a lot less foreclosures going to sale right now than there were when we started.
Yeah.
But if you choose a state or a county that does it, once a week or once a month, they're still going to be compiled. And so you have that opportunity to look at a bunch of houses, to prepare efficiently and go to auction. So right now we're seeing, and I feel like we're at a peak in the market in a lot of different places. That doesn't mean it won't last another couple of years.
Right.
But I will be, I'll be shocked if we continue to see gains, if we continue to see a lot of, sales prices continuing to go up. I don't know how long we'll hover at this. I don't know what will happen with that, but there are less and less foreclosures every month right now. In California, one of the things that causes foreclosures is people get too many loans on the property and then they got underwater when there was an adjustment. In Texas, a lot of the people that are getting foreclosed on, they actually have equity. It's just such a short time frame. It's only a 3-week time frame. They missed a payment, they missed a couple payments, and all of a sudden it's over, and they were never able to catch back up. And so there's a big opportunity with those right now. So I think what we're seeing a lot in Texas is people are buying these foreclosure lists, and they're reaching out to the people ahead of time and saying, hey, let me, you only owe $70,000 on your house. It's worth $100. I'll buy it from you for $80. And so there aren't as many going to sale as there were. So every month we start to see the numbers going down. There's been a few times over the last year we'll see like a spike in foreclosures, and we'll think that maybe there's going to be a pattern. But in general, we see them just kind of slightly going down and hovering. So which is great news, right? It means that it's a stable market. You're still going to find deals where there is a problem to be solved. But yeah, it's been an interesting market just to go from 3 people bidding on 100 houses a day to hundreds of people bidding on 3 houses in a day.
Right.
Like that really changes the price point.
Yeah. Well, that's a great explanation. I appreciate that. It's just, and the thing is the data is really available today. I mean, even more so than even 10, 20 years ago, there's so much more data available for people to research their own areas. So, hey, if you wouldn't mind, just that we're getting close to the end here, but would you mind providing an example of maybe one of the purchase that was maybe the most fun, or it's like, I know the first one was obviously probably the biggest surprise, and thankfully it was the first one. But something that comes to mind is like, perfect from start to finish, or maybe even one that was didn't go so well. I'll call it dealer's choice. Of course, we like to focus on the positive.
I probably have 2 or 3 examples that are probably really fun to show the kind of the gamut of the different options that are out there.
Okay.
We bought one at auction that was in great shape, and at the time it was listed as a short sale. right? So it was listed as a short sale. I went there to change the locks that day after we bought it, and a real estate agent came up and said, hey, we had made an offer on this house in a short sale. Would you maybe want to sell it to us? I've got a cash buyer. And he wrote me a cash offer that day. And we only had to wait for the deed to actually show up. So we bought the house for, $200,000 or something. They think they offered $250,000. And so 12 days later, when we got into escrow, and as soon as the deed recorded, we closed the next day. And it was this giant profit in 12 days. We didn't do any work to it because those people had already, tried to buy it as a short sale. And the reason we were able to get it for $200,000 is there was 2 loans on it, right? So there was $250,000 in loans on it. That's why they were going to offer $250,000, but we bought the first. And so that's an example of like, holy cow, this is a huge opportunity. And we maybe had a dozen like that were super quick and super fast. We had, an average one for us right now is we'll buy a house that's been vacant for like 3 years. A couple windows are boarded up, garages are boarded up. Somebody moved out a long time ago, just took, for whatever reason, took a long time for them to go through the foreclosure process. Mm-hmm. We buy that house on a Tuesday. We change locks that day. For the next few days, we get the garage door replaced. We get the light fixtures replaced. We paint it. We replace the carpet. We get the landscaping done. 5 days later, we list this house for rent. By the following weekend, we have a renter moving in. So essentially 10 days after we buy that house, the house goes from an eyesore that people are breaking into, the kids are screwing around in, the neighbors hate having a vacant house next to them, to now a family lives there. That's the ideal win-win-win that happens. When you target these beat-up vacant houses, it went from, we not only solved a problem, it was one that we got to be very, very proud of because it had been vacant and abandoned for years. The neighbors love us. The people that get to move in as a rental love us, and it's a good investment. That's our average deal right now. We buy dozens of those every month just like that. Paint, carpet, garage door, we list it for rent. We put a renter in there. Everybody wins in that neighborhood. Awesome. One of the, some of the bigger ones. So there was one that I bought that I knew it had been, there was a bunch of fire damage on the inside. Mm-hmm. And I bought it anyway. And it was at a time when a lot of people were bidding. So we had to get more aggressive on what we were going to be able to buy. And so I'd gone inside and seen it. And that was really interesting because I wasn't sure exactly how much it was going to cost me to be able to buy it, or how much it was going to cost me to fix it up because I'd never done that before. But it was kind of like, well, it's going to cost somewhere between $50,000 and $70,000, but as long as I buy it for less than this, I can probably do it. And that got to be a really fun project too, because that went from the house that was learning about a fire damage type house, dismantling all the HVAC system because the biggest part is being able to sell a house without having smoke damage, pressure washing the walls, the soot off the walls, so running pressure washers inside houses, things like that. Wow. But that was this really cool example afterward that we got the house for a good deal. We totally got to learn all about rebuilding and restructuring, and it became something that we weren't afraid of that anymore. And so at the end of the day, somebody bought that house. They never had any complaints afterward, and we were super happy. But sometimes we would do the things where we would add bedrooms, add bathrooms, things like that. But what we found is the way for us to scale is we aren't the flippers that see a house and say, hey, it's 1,500 square feet. Let's turn it into a 2,000 square foot house and really change the floor plan. Right. That's really difficult to scale. It's really difficult to manage, and it's too easy to get it wrong. I don't have an eye for that. Some people do. And so we try to find the ones that are just really simple. Right? Like the person abandoned it, dog chewed up the stuff. It needs new baseboard. It needs new paint. So those are some examples of the way that we've done it.
Excellent. And I like the philosophy. I learned the same thing over the years is I would rather spend a little bit more on a property that had a smaller project required as opposed to buy a cheaper property with a much bigger project because, the bigger the project, the bigger the risk. Time overruns, cost overruns, just all kinds of things can go wrong. So, and I appreciate you bringing that to light because it's a valuable life lesson too. So, hey, real quick, Aaron, I just want to say thanks for being here, man. That was a lot of good content, a lot of good stuff you shared. And I may have you on again another time, maybe go over like some case studies or something, because I got a feeling we're gonna get some feedback on this one because it's somewhat unique and it's one I haven't done myself. So I appreciate you being willing and open to share your valuable knowledge and experience, man.
Yeah, no, it's fun. I mean, I really have a passion for it. I think that the foreclosures and courthouse step stuff is is really just a ton of fun, and it's super unique. And some people will hear this and go, do not want to do that. That sounds horrible. And some people will do it and say, I totally want to try that. So feel free to, you could put an email address or some contact info for me on the podcast. The people can reach out to me. And I'd be happy to answer more questions, especially happy to come back on if you get a bunch of questions in, we can come on and answer them.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I've got an event coming up at the end of August here, and I'll be doing another one potentially in Dallas or around Dallas, like the first weekend of November. I'm going to even come there and just spend an hour or two just giving people a demonstration. If you're in Texas at the time, if you're back in California, obviously that's not going to be as convenient, but I'll keep you posted on that, because I think you're natural. You come across, you're just another good guy from Go Bunnets, right? So I would love to do that. And what I'll do is anything, if you got any, if you've ever written a special report, or if you're looking at writing a book or something, just let me know, and I'll help you get it promoted through the group here, because we're all learners. We want to learn as much as we can learn.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And we have an office out in Dallas. So just let me know those dates.
Cool.
I'd be happy to come meet up with you again.
That sounds good, Aaron. And for everybody listening, God bless you and your families. And I think I speak for everybody, Aaron, when we say thanks again as a group for you doing this. And we'll see you all on the next podcast. So take care and God bless.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. Be sure to go to myinvestmentservices.com to join our community and start building wealth today.